correspondence courses, and the farm magazines would even have articles in them.
Well, they're calling these solo troops because they don't have them attached.
Yeah, well,
To
it's,
service
it is, so
units.
it's in a different, they're not alone, but a solo, yeah, it is. Okay, regional, then from regional, should I skip to national?
I think so.
And then the national,
Is
the
the
fact
national
that
what you
I was
got
on
you
the
to the
program committee, and on the birth weight, yeah.
It'd be interesting for you to talk about how national was structured at that time. If it's
Traveled abroad, okay. Let's see, where would we go? We would have gone to, first maybe London. There would be the Wags and Girl Guide and Art, which is now
Silly Penny right here.
Orlo
Like that.
House. Now it's center at Cox Hill, right? I can, you know what I can do? The silver pin isn't here, but I can kind of. Does it help if you're talking about it to point as though the silver Peru pin was in this? Does this help visually? Not necessarily. It does, it doesn't. Let's see, this is Sangam. And here, this is what we threaten to do in the future with some of the other people.
yes, but if we never get around to it, I want to make sure that we at least get
Now,
started.
to start, do you want to ask me a question or
Well,
something?
we'll start first setting the date. Use
So-
the date, Tyler. It's October 20th. Happens to be about 5 after 5. We're here visiting with Ruth Davis, who has an illustrious career in Girl Scouting, and we'll go over the various positions and things that she's done. To be fair to Ruth, that we will let the audience know that we stuck up on her. This is essentially an oral history of her experiences in Girl Scouting, but it's the first step towards some of the things we're trying to do in the Greater Minneapolis Girl Scout Council on recording important events in which our people have participated.
Well, good. Well, I started my first troop in 1939. Before my children were born, I hadn't been in scouting, but I had a recreation and camping background. And then, luckily, I had two girls after the troop started. They stayed in for a while. And the war came along in 1941, so naturally there was a great deal of emphasis on what we could do. Victory Gardens were part of the troop program, and of course every kind of medal that we could lay our hands on. And we had sugar ration stamps so that when you had cookouts, accordingly, you had to watch everything. But it was really a wonderful experience because we didn't have quite all the affluence and so many conveniences.
How old were the girls in this troop?
Oh, the girls that I started with were intermediates. We had brownies, intermediates, and seniors. So I had the intermediates for about 10 years, and then I had the best luck in the world as the girls got older. I went into senior scouting, and that was absolutely remarkable.
So the intermediates were grades 4 through 9?
Well, yes. And the love of my life in scouting were really the senior girls, because we had the cream from about 5 troops. And initially, before we started the senior troop, we went out for a weekend, and it was the first time in my life out at camp anybody ever brought me a cup of coffee in bed. So I said, that's for me. So that from that point on, and the highlight of our senior troop was the girls did everything, and we took a 2-week car trip, driving all the way down the Mississippi to Mark Twain country and New Orleans, and all the way back, and visited and stayed at public facilities and that all the way. So it was a simply marvelous experience. And
How many girls went?
there were about 13, and many of those girls now are doing remarkable jobs in the business world and volunteer and education. So it's really wonderful to feel, the continuity there. And then shortly after that, we had day camping, but nothing too official. So during the war, Camp Lacamaga in St. Paul, and now St. Croix Valley, had one of the National Day Camp training courses. So I went there, and then we started what at that time was the first official day camp in Minneapolis, and it was at Bassett's Creek. And from that time on, we trained the staff, Marion Rubens and a few other people. Some of the girls who are now, well, we call them girls, they're still girls, but they're older, they're my contemporaries, were at that first or second day camp, I know. And then we had leaders associations. And the Lakes Leaders Association had quite a good group, and many of them ended up as presidents of council, and some of us ended up on the board, and I was with program committee and camping, and then Juliet Lowe. There was a great deal of emphasis after World War II on reconstruction in various countries because they had been bombed out, they had no pencils, no papers, no headquarters. So the Juliet Lowe World Friendship Fund, directly and through the World Thinking Day Fund, poured in a tremendous number of resources and personnel to help countries reestablish scouting in Europe and to establish scouting for the first time in places in the Far East, like Japan. And our Juliet Lowe World Friendship Fund was the big rally occasion for all of the troops citywide to get together. They weren't always citywide. Let us say that there were 8 sections of town, neighborhoods or associations, and they would gather their pennies, even glue them on in designs. It would sometimes take us weeks to take these pennies off because pennies were like nickels or dimes now. And we'd have these rallies sectionally, and we'd go out, and the girls would not only do the pennies, they'd find out where the money was going, they would do the songs, pick a country, do the songs, the dance, the costumes, the foods, and it was really quite something till we worked this penny fund up into, I think, close to $2,000 a year just from Minneapolis Council alone. Well, since then, there, of course, has been a change and an emphasis in many things. And so, from that point on, after leaving, I was still in the council, but then I found the experience of being on the regional committee was very interesting, not directly with the girls, but it still had to do with international selections, you know, and that sort of thing. And there were 12 regions in the country at that time, and we were region 10, Minnesota, North, and South Dakota.
Far Northland.
Yeah, the far Northland is calling me away, the nice song. And at that time, too, we were assigned not only to committees like selections, but we would go out to lone troops. And for instance, to go to Le Sueur, there was no council at that time, so we would go out and meet with the troops and give the training. In fact, before that time, there were in farm journals and all kinds of magazines information where girls and leaders could organize troops. And so you can find brochures on lone troops, you can find magazine articles and, you know, farm journals and everything else. So it was quite fun.
Who did they send those to? To national? To the region?
No, I think the material went right into national. And there was a lone troop department or service where they were. But then it would be in the late 50s, there was something called the Green Umbrella, or it was CC, Council Coverage. And it took about 12 to 15 years because it meant some councils that had been little tiny units. We knew of one council that had a very large adult board of directors and no troops, no girls. I mean, these things just, happened. I mean, at one time there'd been a lot. And the fact is they still had a camp or they had property. So we wanted to, nationally and regionally and everybody, outside of the few exceptional ones that wanted to hang on to their piece of property or historically have been so important, no longer serve girls, make it possible so that every girl or every troop in the country belonged to a council and could have somewhat comparable services, help in camping, help in program, help in badge, or whatever needed doing. And so this border to border, so when you left one border of a council, you belonged to another border, so they're no longer lone troops. And then after that had proceeded and the country was covered by the green umbrella, now I suppose it's a blue and green umbrella.
experience.
Yeah, so from regional, then at that time, well, we still have a national council meeting. One is meeting right now in Miami, and we have a huge Minneapolis delegation. The National Council did meet with representatives from every council around the country, delegates depending on the number of registered scouts. And in those 12 regions, they elected people to the National Board of Directors and the offices, which they'll do here too, in Miami. Well, I was elected as one of 2 representatives from Region 10, Minnesota, North and South Dakota, and I just happened to be from Minneapolis. It was more important, I was from the region. So at that time, I served 3 years on the program committee, which was simply wonderful because we had so many senior girl events, and we had jamborees and, you know, all of those things, and we'll have them again sometime, of course. And in addition to the program committee, I served on the birthplace. It was kind of cute in a way because I was the only northerner amongst all these southerners meeting in Savannah, Georgia. And the only time that I personally, during the 3 years, attended the birthplace committee meeting, it was St. Pat's Day. And as a non-Irish, non-Southerner, I was just delighted and flabbergasted to find that when we got up at breakfast, we looked out and the Savannah River was colored green. Everybody was Irish. And we had corned
Here you
beef.
thought it was just Girl Scouting event.
We had corned beef and cabbage and Irish potatoes for breakfast, for brunch. So, and the birthplace, of course, had just been started to function, and at that time I ended up with some of the original shingles and knew quite a number of the people, and even had a book signed by some people who were in that first and second, I think the White Rose and the Carnation Patrol, so that's tucked away, and it'll eventually end up in the council archives.
Oh, what was the White Rose?
Well, these were the first 2 patrols of the first troop in Savannah, Georgia, but we'll find those later. And then in addition to that committee, I worked with the Religious Advisory Committee, and when I went off the board, realized that there was help to girls of various faiths around the country who wanted to work for their Catholic or their Protestant award. We had
God and Country Awards.
Yes.
I found mine in the piano bench
I did,
just the other day.
and we had an award called the Menorah Award, but we had no local groups to assist, so I helped establish what was called the National Jewish Field Committee. It just started off the cuff at a convention in Dallas, Texas, where we just approached people and had an informal meeting. And right now, we have a large national group. In fact, I think we have committees in about 30 cities of the country now.
Now, when was this first meeting of the National Jewish Field Committee?
Oh dear, about 20 years ago. It was during the Dallas convention, so we could easily check that through. And then the one particularly interesting thing, luckily I, on the program committee, and I had been on the staff of a conference in the home at Purdue University, and I think after that they felt that I might have a little experience in that field. So we were having the first Juliet Low session at Sangam. Sangam had just been established, and so they asked me if I would lead with the co-leader. Wonderful, just a wonderful group. This is the lovely stone Buddha that is out in the main yard. Mm-hmm. And when the Buddha was carved in another part of the country, they purchased a special seat instead of in baggage, so that it came on the train in a purchased seat all the way to Pune before it was established, in its regular place.
Who's learning to play the sitar there? It does not look like one of
Oh,
the
no,
Indian
it's one of the
girls.
American girls for sure. We had, there were 6 Americans and 6 girls, Bharat, girls from India, and then 2 from each of the other countries. And I don't know, I think that pretty well covers it. These are some more pictures from Sangam. India is quite a place. Isn't that enough? think we've covered the waterfront. And more. We've been flooded.
Let me take a
Well,
break here.
you know, the nice thing is that the gals like you were even interested in it.
Well, if we don't do it, we're going to lose
Yeah.
it somehow
Yeah.
because we're so busy literally trying to just catalog the physical material
Yeah.
that if we lose some of the memories,
Yeah.
those are the ones that we can't capture later.
Yeah.
They don't exist in any format right now. And
Yeah.
until the committee, I think we're so busy trying